Yo, welcome to I guess my first real video in terms of actual content. Today I'll be kind of showing off, demonstrating how to play U-Boat. Now, I do not believe I have any functional mods currently installed, uh, because the 1.0 update kind of invalidating most of the mods that exist at the moment, because this game did just get its 1.0 update. I'm currently deciding whether I want to take a northern route and avoid the English Passage because there's a lot of ports here, meaning that there is going to be a lot of enemy shipping and there's aircraft and a lot of patrols in that area, meaning that it'll be a high intensity route, but very quick and easy. Alternatively, I could take the northern route, bypassing only really one port of issue, being Linus up there, and basically kind of have a freer reign to get there. And it's really going to come down to the wire of do I want to see about getting earlier kills, or do I want to have a much more safer and have more equipment when I do get to my patrols? In this case, because I feel confident, I will be going down the English channel. But we'll be going over the next step, which is preparations, now that I've got my route planned. Because I've already talked to my leading officer and gotten my patrol, because I'm running on an extremely realistic setup. And have it set to where I have full crew management. I have only I've got food management. I've got to make sure I have everything under my direct control in that regard, as if I were a officer on board the vessel. The only difference being is that I've got this more third-person perspective because I actually want to do a little bit of story writing off of this game. If anyone's a Kentai Collection or Cancall fan, then you'll kind of understand if you read on Space Battles, kind of the content that you can expect. As for equipment that I purchased, I specifically went after getting the free torpedoes because they're cheap. Restocking with my and just kind of going through each tab, adding an extra first aid kit and repair kit, just so that way I've got that extra bit of security in case something does happen. Shouldn't need it. I've got the free food, and then I've got extra ammo. These two slots I'll be leaving open in case I find any loot. Pardon me. In terms of food, obviously I have gotten the potatoes because they were free, and that's a lot of food, relatively speaking. And I am not purchasing any of the food here, just because that's very fucking expensive. In terms of ammunition, I prioritized getting the 100 rounds of deck gun ammo, because the deck gun is really powerful, especially this early on. I've reliably sunk corvettes, and I've even engaged destroyers successfully with the deck gun. To be fair, I've engaged destroyers with machine guns successfully, but that's not for this video. This video is going to be covering kind of like the basic setup and how to get into the best position you can from a realistic standpoint. So getting the free food, getting as much deck gun ammo, and getting high explosive flat gun ammo. The reason why you want flat gun high explosive is because the flat gun high explosive has a really high chance of setting something on fire, which is really good. The AP is good at, obviously attacking larger and stronger, more heavily armored ships, but you're not really going to be using a flat gun against an armored ship. You're instead going to be using either the deck gun or torpedoes, which we'll get to in a second. Now, the flat gun, however, you will be using against freighters. And if you can set a freighter on fire, well, then you don't have to really worry about focusing on that freighter and can work on your next freighter until it either has its fire put out, or if you have it burned down and, sink. The deck gun is going to be my primary utilized weapon because the torpedoes are good for defeating the escorts. The deck gun is good for defeating escorts that survive the opening salvo, and then the machine gun is good for mopping up. Because, frankly, you don't really want to engage aircraft, you want to just get away from it. In terms of fuel, you start out with a full tank, so you don't need to worry about that there, unless you're doing the tutorial, at which point you will have a reduced fuel. In terms of torpedoes, I in fact bought only the T1 or the T2 PI1s because they're free, which gives me more ammunition for the deck gun. Now, the thing about these, they have a maximum range of 5 kilometers, which isn't very far. I can't remember how far that translates into knots just offhand, but it is a very, very short-range torpedo, and you have to keep that in mind. However, these have a maximum range of 12 kilometers, meaning that technically you could use the T1 PI1s to outrange even the legendary I-19, who managed to make a shot of 11 kilometers. So if, though I could be wrong, I do make mistakes all the time. So I've stocked up on the free one, loading it into every single tube. And you can see this one's currently undergoing maintenance because basically you need to maintain your torpedoes in order to make sure they function properly. And so I've got my submarine fully loaded because I am going on a patrol mission, and it is early September. Lastly, for items, I will be selling that so that way I can get extra machine gun. Because I have yet to use a breathing apparatus, honestly. And if I ever do need one, I'm probably only going to send one man in, because otherwise the rest of the crew's going to be. Anyway, I haven't really used coffee all that much, and so it's a free $1,000. So I will take the extra ammunition as well, because more bullets is good. So in total, I have 130 rounds of large caliber armor-piercing ammo, and 3,000 armor-piercing flat gun ammo, and 1,062 high explosive flat gun. And that's everything I carry aboard, except for one additional breathing apparatus. Later, I plan on getting a diving suit, because that allows you to scavenge ships that you've sunk, and probably a carabiner 98K. I've also decorated my boat a little bit. I've given her the teak wood decking. I've given her the Type 6 camouflage. I did not put the shark on the front because that's just not my thing. Though you can do that with the bow decoration here. I like keeping my deck gun, though you can remove it in order to get slightly more speed. I don't recommend doing this, simply because the deck gun is very powerful early on if you know how to shoot. Lastly, I've changed my emblem to the fox because I like foxes. That's it. Internally, I did not add the Christmas tree just because, and we cannot upgrade the listening room or anything else. I did, however, add this shark paint to my torpedoes because, let's be frank, the enemy is probably not going to see them until it's too late. Lastly, I'm going to give you a very nude shot of below the water and close out. Now, I recommend that you take the Type 7 U-boat specifically. The reason for this is that the Type 2 is, quite frankly, dog shit in terms of capabilities. It's very short range. It's only meant for basically close-in patrols around the German coast. And the game isn't really balanced for that. It's balanced more towards the longer campaign. And so the Type 7 is my recommended boat for doing so. You can do the Type 2, but you only get about 5 torpedoes instead of the... you get 4 in the bow tubes, you get an additional 8 in the storage, meaning you get a total of 14 torpedoes once you add in the 2 in the stern. Unfortunately, you cannot transfer torpedoes from the bow to the stern, though I wish you could do that. And one last thing is to just try to make sure that you're monitoring your stats up here. Now, in terms of budget, obviously, I've no budget left because I've spent it all, but that's fine because you don't spend your budget as you're underway. You only spend it in order to get shit. Next up is reputation. Reputation can be very, very easy to maintain. In fact, the easiest way I've found of getting and maintaining reputation is that if you go up to a lifeboat after sinking an enemy vessel, you can give away some of your for free food and get an additional 10% XP if you give them 10 items of food. That 10% XP will get you 10% of the way onto your next reputation, which, oh boy, reputation is extremely powerful. So, if you go out carrying, I don't know, 80 potatoes that you got for free, that means you can get 80 free reputation points if you sink 8 enemy ships, or 4 with 2 lifeboats, or however many, and give each of those lifeboats 10 potatoes. You know? It's just free experience and free reputation. Next up is discipline. Discipline, very easy to maintain. All you have to do is put more than one item in your kitchen in terms of cooking. I don't recommend putting more than 2 because the major thing about the galley and how it functions is the more items you put into the galley, the faster it burns them. However, it also increases the morale gained from it. I recommend only 2 items so that way you've got that long-term storage, and you also have that decent morale boost of a +4 from various dishes. You also want to keep your lights on normal whenever it is daytime. You will turn them red when it is nighttime, and you will also turn them blue whenever you are in need of quiet, which we'll get to later. Lastly, the next major step in making sure that everything is prepared is you want to go to your radio officer and select him, and then select Operate the Radio right above his profile. Once you're in this view, which you can also do just by selecting the officer and scrolling in, what you're going to want to do is choose some radio music to play. Once you do so, he will begin playing music, which will add an additional +4 to your morale per minute in terms of just keeping it up. Plus, it does kind of keep out some of the boredom. Lastly, we're going to keep going on the rest of the main parts of your HUD here. You've got your air quality. Obviously, if you're underwater for too long, your crew is going to run out of oxygen. You can also run the compression pumps while underwater. However, these things drain your oxygen really fast. You can turn on your ventilation, which is over here, in order to keep some of your oxygen around, but it's not prohibitive to keeping on one of your compressors. I recommend turning them on when you're on the surface, where you're gaining 6,000 fresh air a minute. Next up, you've got your fuel. Obviously, the faster you're going to go, the better you're going to consume your fuel. You can reduce the fuel consumption by adding crew members to navigation and engines. Navigation is very simple to set. What you do is you want to turn off your gyro compass, so that way your captain actually wants to go to the map, because the gyro compass gives you a passive gain to your navigation capacity. Now, what you're then going to do is select a leader class officer and go to the navigation station. Once there, you can then select to add him to navigate, and what he will do is he will slowly add more navigational accuracy over time. But if you add an additional crew member or 2, you can get an additional 40% off your fuel consumption. And I believe it's 40%. It might be 20%, but I digress. This also applies to electrical charge, which is rebuilt by using the diesel engines or by being docked, as you can see here. Now, by running the diesel engines, you can run them stationary, or you can just have your ship moving, and the diesel will recharge your batteries. Historically, your batteries would be in the bow underneath this compartment here, but they're not something we really have to worry about all that much. All you really need to worry about with them is that they keep your electric engines running, which enable you to move your ship underwater. With the compressors, they refill your air, as I mentioned earlier, which also enables you to fire your torpedoes. Your torpedoes will use about 2% compressed air per shot, and if you're going to surface from underwater, it will use about 30% of your compressed air tank. This can be increased with upgrades at the headquarters, but again, that's for another time. One last thing before I set off. We're going to be going over the controls. So you have your different camera selection over here. You have your date, time, and location. You have your different time controls. And over here, you have your telegraph, your depth meter, your rudder, your gyro compass, which in my case it's off, a chronometer or a clock, and then you have the map. Turning these off, you have your crew members down here, and you have how many sailors are on duty. Having more sailors on duty will affect your discipline by having your discipline going down if you have too many crew members working. However, that is also canceled out by having varied dishes and music, which will add discipline back. Just keep in mind, if you reach 0 discipline, you're going to have a bad day. Now, your officers, of which you start with 5, 2 leader class units, 2 mechanic units, and 1 radio man. Leader units can fire the guns, can perform observations using the USO, or they can operate the periscopes. They can also authorize torpedo firings, and are generally used as commanding units. Mechanics are good at repairing the ship, operating the engines, and generally performing damage control if you have them stationed at the command station while at alarm. But we will cover this at a later time. Next up, radio men are your medics and your ears. You want to always have a radio man, because if you put them in the listening room, you will be able to hear a lot farther than you can see. If you get really good at the game, you can get to the point that you can manually listen up to about 100 nautical miles or so. I personally feel I'm good to about 80 nautical miles and are reasonably able to pick out what type of target I'm listening to. Unfortunately, the game does not have the realistic piece of having multiple engine noises. It only has one generic engine noise, which is a distinct chuff, chuff, chuff noise, which we'll get to at a later date, which will be easy to pick out and tell you how many ships there are. I believe that will cover it all for our introductory video on preparing your ship for its first patrol and future patrols.